Donna Adelson, once admired as a devoted mother, now accused as the mastermind of a brutal murder. Her son, once her closest ally, takes the stand to reveal a childhood ruled by control and fear. Her daughter, trapped for years behind forced smiles, exposes secrets that shatter the illusion of a perfect family. In this trial, loyalty collides with truth, and the children who once defended her now deliver the testimony that could seal her fate. The trial of Donna Adelson was unlike anything the quiet courthouse had ever seen. Crowds gathered outside each morning, drawn not only by the gravity of the case, but by the shocking betrayal that had made headlines across the nation. Cameras flashed as the once highly respected woman was escorted into the courtroom, her eyes fixed forward, refusing to acknowledge the chaos around her. She had once been the face of elegance and control, a woman admired in social circles and spoken of with admiration in the community. Now she was shackled by accusation, sitting at the defense table while whispers of her guilt echoed through every corner of the room. The case had already drawn intense speculation long before the trial began. The crime itself had been brutal, cold, and precise, leaving investigators with a trail that always seemed to loop back toward the Adelson family. For years there had been talk of secrets locked behind polished doors, of a family whose wealth and power concealed a darker reality. At first, those whispers had been dismissed as jealousy or rumor, but the deeper investigators dug, the more they discovered a tangled web of control and fear that seemed to stretch back for decades. In the center of that web sat Donna, a woman whose influence over her children was described by those closest to them as absolute. On the opening day of testimony, the courtroom was filled with an electricity that could be felt in the stillness of the air. The prosecution rose with a deliberate calm, laying out a story that painted Donna not as a grieving mother or an innocent woman caught in a storm of lies, but as a mastermind. According to the state, she had carefully orchestrated every detail of the murder, using those closest to her as pawns in a plan designed to eliminate a problem and secure her family's reputation. It was not a crime of passion, they argued, but a crime of calculation. The idea that someone so respected, so trusted, could be capable of such ruthlessness left the public stunned. The real shock, however, was yet to come. The prosecutors revealed that their star witnesses were not law enforcement officers or distant acquaintances, but Donna's very own children. For years, they had been by her side, standing shoulder to shoulder, maintaining the facade of unity. They had appeared in family photographs with forced smiles, attended public events as a picture of togetherness, and defended their mother against suspicion whenever it arose. Yet now, in this very courtroom, they would be the ones to expose her secrets. The thought of children testifying against their mother in a case of this magnitude was nearly unthinkable, and the weight of that betrayal hung in the air like a storm cloud waiting to break. Every seat in the gallery was filled as journalists scribbled furiously in their notebooks, eager to capture the unraveling of a family once held up as an example of success. The quiet tension inside was broken only by the steady hum of the air conditioning and the faint shuffle of papers as attorneys prepared their arguments. Observers leaned forward in anticipation, sensing that the testimony about to be heard would not only decide Donna Adelson's fate, but also reveal the cracks in a family that had worked so hard to hide them. What no one yet knew was how deep those cracks ran, and how much pain and fear had been buried beneath the polished surface of their lives. The first witness called by the prosecution was Donna Adelson's son, and the moment he entered the courtroom, the silence was so heavy it felt unbreakable. Once seen as his mother's closest ally, he now stood on the opposite side of the room, prepared to reveal truths that no one outside the family had ever heard. Observers could not look away as he took his seat, his face pale but resolute, the weight of years of secrecy pressing down on his shoulders. To the public, the moment felt surreal. The same young man who had once been pictured proudly beside his mother at social gatherings was now poised to testify that the woman who raised him had been capable of planning something unspeakable. His testimony began not with the crime itself, but with his childhood, a careful foundation of what life under Donna had been like. He described a household where obedience was not encouraged but demanded, where every decision was filtered through his mother's expectations. She was not a parent who nurtured. She was a figure who commanded. Choices about school, friends, and even careers were shaped by her strong will, leaving little space for independence. He explained how, at first, her control seemed to come from love, but over time it became clear it was about power. He described growing up with the sense that disappointing her was the worst sin imaginable, and that lesson followed him into adulthood. The courtroom listened intently as he recounted the atmosphere leading up to the murder. He spoke of late-night meetings in the family home, conversations laced with tension, and cryptic remarks that suggested something serious was being discussed just beyond his understanding. At the time, he admitted, he tried to convince himself he was imagining things, that his mother's intensity was nothing more than stress. But looking back, every detail seemed to fall into place. The urgency in her tone, the hushed phone calls, the way she spoke of problems needing to be handled. The jury leaned forward, their expressions fixed as he revealed how those fragments of memory now felt like pieces of a larger plan that he had been too afraid to acknowledge. The most chilling part of his testimony came when he confessed how guilt had consumed him in the aftermath of the crime. He spoke of living with the weight of knowing something was wrong, but staying silent, trapped between his loyalty to his family and his own conscience. He admitted that he had convinced himself silence was protection, that defending his mother was the only way to preserve the family. But as the years passed, that silence became unbearable. The evidence he had seen, the behaviors he had witnessed, all pointed to the truth he could no longer deny. His voice trembled as he revealed that what had once felt like love from his mother had been nothing more than manipulation, carefully disguised to ensure obedience. Every word from the witness stand eroded the image Donna A.'s defense had worked so hard to protect. The son's testimony was not just about facts. It was about emotion, about the raw confession of someone who had lived in the shadow of a mother's control. He was not only exposing the crime, but revealing the damage of a life spent under her influence. The courtroom sat in stunned silence as he finished, and for the first time it became clear that this case was not just about murder. It was about the collapse of an entire family's foundation, shaken by the courage of a son who had finally chosen truth over loyalty. The next witness was Donna Adelson's daughter, and her appearance in the courtroom carried a different kind of weight. Where her brother's testimony had been marked by restrained anger and long-suppressed guilt, hers carried an air of sorrow and deep exhaustion, as though the years of keeping secrets had drained the life out of her. The jury watched closely as she settled into the witness chair, clutching the edges as though steadying herself against the tide of memories she was about to release. If the son's testimony cracked the family's image, hers threatened to shatter it entirely. She began by recounting her childhood not in terms of rules, but in terms of performance. To the outside world, their family appeared polished and ideal, but beneath the surface, everything revolved around maintaining that illusion. Every holiday, every dinner party, every public event was staged, orchestrated by Donna with precision. Smiles were required, laughter rehearsed, and mistakes were never tolerated. The daughter explained that this facade became second nature, so much so that she learned to hide her true feelings even from herself. What she did not hide, however, was the memory of her mother's sudden shifts from warmth to coldness. One moment Donna could be affectionate and attentive, and the next she would unleash icy silence or cutting remarks that left her children feeling small and powerless. The courtroom grew quieter as the daughter recounted how the murder cast an even darker shadow over their lives. She described the days afterward when her mother insisted the family carry on as though nothing had changed. Vacations were booked, photos were taken, and they were instructed to smile bigger than ever. Every outing became a calculated performance to project innocence, and every slip in composure was met with stern reminders of what was at stake. She explained that these staged moments became unbearable, each smile in a photograph feeling like a mask she could no longer remove. Her testimony moved into chilling detail about her mother's private words. Donna had reminded them constantly that survival depended on loyalty, and loyalty meant silence. The daughter admitted that she spent years obeying this unspoken law, terrified of what disobedience might bring. She told the jury that her mother had an ability to make fear feel like love, to frame control as protection, and to convince her children that the outside world was the real danger. For a long time, she believed it. It was only when she stepped back and saw how much of her life had been dictated by fear that she realized the truth. The danger had been inside their own home all along. As her testimony continued, her voice shook, but never faltered. She spoke of sleepless nights, of guilt pressing down on her chest, of the growing realization that silence had made her complicit. By the time she finished, tears streaked her face, yet her words had been steady enough to carve through the courtroom's stillness. Observers were left stunned not only by the revelations but by the raw humanity of her account. It was more than a statement against her mother. It was the unveiling of years of hidden suffering. What had once seemed like the perfect family now stood revealed as a carefully crafted illusion, and with each word from the daughter's mouth, the illusion dissolved into something far darker and far more tragic. The defense entered the fourth week of the trial with mounting desperation, aware that the jury's perception of Donna Adelson was slipping further out of reach. They worked tirelessly to reframe her image, presenting her as a misunderstood mother whose words and actions had been twisted by circumstance. Photographs of family vacations and glowing testimonials from old acquaintances were paraded before the court, each one intended to remind the jury that Donna had once been a woman admired and respected. But those glossy images clashed violently with the testimonies already given by her own children, and the more the defense tried to polish her reputation, the more it seemed to crumble. The prosecution countered with evidence that carried an unshakable weight. For the first time, the jury heard recordings that had been captured in moments when Donna believed she was speaking freely. These were not the rehearsed lines of a woman shielding herself from suspicion, but candid glimpses into a calculating mind. In one conversation, she spoke of problems that needed to be resolved, her tone detached and clinical. In another, she described contingencies, the kind of forward planning that painted her as someone unwilling to leave anything to chance. Each word, replayed in the silent courtroom, pressed heavier on the juror's conscience. Her children, now fully aligned with the prosecution, were asked to confirm the voices on those tapes. With visible discomfort, they acknowledged that it was indeed their mother's voice, and in doing so, they gave the evidence a final seal of authenticity. Their confirmation carried a devastating emotional impact, for it was not investigators or strangers placing Donna's words before the jury, it was her own family. The betrayal she must have felt in those moments was visible only in fleeting flashes across her expression, but her children never looked her way. The defense tried to dismiss the recordings as misunderstandings, arguing that the words had been taken out of context, fragments of conversations that painted an incomplete picture. They suggested she had been speaking out of fear, exaggerating scenarios as a way of coping. Yet the recordings, combined with the testimonies, formed a puzzle that fit too neatly to ignore. Each statement from her children became a piece that locked the evidence into place, dismantling the carefully constructed image of an innocent matriarch caught in a storm. The courtroom felt charged with unease as the jurors weighed these revelations. Observers noted how even seasoned reporters seemed shaken by the exposure of a woman who had once been admired, but was now unmasked in such a stark and public way. The recordings did more than prove involvement. They revealed intent. They exposed not a reaction to tragedy, but a plan that preceded it, a plan shaped by a desire for control. By the end of the day, the prosecution had turned the trial into something much larger than a murder case. It was now a story of influence, of fear, and of the devastating cost of a mother's manipulation. The defense, though relentless in its attempts to soften the blow, could not erase the echo of Donna's own words playing over the speakers. The damage had been done, and the jurors carried those words with them, the memory of a voice stripped bare of pretense, revealing a truth no polished photograph could ever cover. The final days of the trial carried a tension so sharp it seemed to seep into every corner of the courtroom. Weeks of testimony, evidence, and revelations had dismantled the pristine image Donna Adelson once carried, leaving in its place the portrait of a woman whose influence had stretched beyond ordinary maternal authority. The jury, now weary yet focused, had been presented with two starkly different versions of her life: the devoted mother who had been caught in a net of accusations, and the manipulative architect of a crime that had torn lives apart. What made the case so gripping was not only the crime itself, but the fact that her own children had been the ones to peel back the layers of deception. Their words lingered like shadows, impossible to ignore. On the morning of closing arguments, the courtroom was filled beyond capacity. Reporters jostled for space, their pens ready to capture the outcome of a trial that had fascinated the nation. The prosecution spoke first, weaving together weeks of testimony and evidence into a chilling narrative. They reminded the jury of the recordings, of the details revealed by the son, of the haunting memories shared by the daughter. They argued that the evidence was not fragmented or coincidental, but a tapestry of intent, sewn together by Donna herself. The prosecutor's voice rang steady as they told the jury that loyalty had once kept the truth hidden, but now loyalty had been replaced by honesty, and the children's decision to testify was proof of the depth of their mother's influence and the courage it took to resist it. The defense fought to salvage what they could. They painted Donna as a victim of betrayal, a woman who had given everything to her family only to have them turn against her in her darkest hour. They urged the jury to question the motives of her children, suggesting bitterness and resentment had driven their testimony. They argued that the prosecution had built a story from assumptions, twisting ordinary conversations into sinister plots. Their closing was emotional, appealing to sympathy rather than logic, an attempt to remind the jury that behind the evidence sat a woman whose life had been reduced to fragments on a tape recorder. When the jury retired to deliberate, the courtroom emptied into hushed clusters in the hallways. Hours passed slowly, each one dragging with anticipation. Families of the victims sat in quiet solidarity, while Donna's supporters clung to the hope of acquittal. Inside the jury room, the weight of the case pressed down with an almost physical force. They replayed the recordings, revisited the testimonies, and debated the meaning of loyalty, control, and intent. As night approached, a decision was reached. The following morning, the courtroom filled once more as the verdict was read. The foreperson's voice was steady, but carried the gravity of finality, guilty on all charges. Gasps spread through the gallery, followed by silence so deep it felt unending. Donna Adelson sat motionless, her expression unreadable, though her eyes betrayed the flicker of disbelief. Her children did not look at her. They stared ahead, their faces pale with the knowledge that justice had been served, but at a cost they would carry forever. The trial closed not only with a conviction, but with a story that left the nation unsettled. It was a reminder that the bonds of family, often thought unbreakable, could fracture under the weight of truth. It was a story of control disguised as love, of loyalty twisted into silence, and of courage born out of unbearable guilt. For Donna's children, The verdict marked the end of years of fear, but it also marked the beginning of a life where their names would forever be tied to the mother they had once defended. The story ended with justice. But justice in this case came at the price of family itself, a haunting reminder of how power and control can destroy the very foundation they claim to protect.